In addition to our subjective experience of the world, its sights and sounds, there is, of course, our inner experience, our thoughts and feelings and intentions, our conscious minds. In this video, we'll explore how consciousness comes about, what it really is, and how we know. Now, aside from the mystery of subjective experience explored in other videos, we can be very confident in describing the conscious mind as emergent from the neural processes of the brain. The mind and the brain, then, are two different levels of explanation for the same phenomena, just as a hurricane can be described at two levels, one in terms of its overall size and speed and rotational rate and interactions with hills and other impediments, and another lower level description in terms of the motions of individual air molecules. In the same way, we can have mind level and brain level descriptions of the same events. But what is the conscious mind really? For most people, it's experienced as a mix of words and phrases and sentences, somehow internally heard, and various types of fragmentary and more or less schematic imagery, somehow internally seen, all closely associated with various feelings. Described this way, maybe the source of all these internal phrases and images and sensations has occurred to you. They come from the activation of our sensory cortex, from the parts of the brain that process actual sounds and actual sights coming from the outside world. At some point in the evolution of our brain, systems for processing sights and sounds and other sensations in real time were co-opted for a new purpose, to allow the brain to imagine or remember sensations not currently present. When this happened, consciousness in this sense was born. We normally think of information in the brain flowing from sense organs like the eye through lower and then higher level sensory processing areas of the brain to the highest level planning areas of the brain, and then through motor control areas leading to action by muscles and glands. We could call this the upstream direction of information flow, and of course, lots of information flows this way. That's how we experience the world. But surprisingly, there's actually more neural traffic, more information flow in the downstream direction, from the higher level planning centers to the high and then low level sensory processing areas. No doubt, some of this downstream flow is used to train the brain to perceive accurately and to focus attention, but it is also used in memory and imagination. At a high level, we might think of the concept chair, which triggers the higher level sensory systems to deliver a more or less abstract and conceptual image of a chair. This idea that consciousness arises from the internal triggering of sensory systems is confirmed by many experiments and observations using brain scanning techniques like positron emission tomography or functional magnetic resonance imaging. In one experiment, measurements of activity in the visual centers V1 to V4 allowed determination of the angle of imagined lines by comparison to activity when actually viewing lines with that angle. Also, imagining something can interfere with simultaneous perception of a similar thing, apparently because of competition for the same brain resources. But if the same brain systems are used to imagine and also to perceive physical things, why don't we get confused? Why don't we take our imaginings for reality? Well, we might. That's what a hallucination is, an imagined experience that is taken to be real, whether during a psychotic mental state or under the influence of psychedelic drugs or during fever or in dreams. And experiments have shown the reverse. Even for normal subjects, very faint actual images can influence imagined images, a phenomenon known as the Perky effect, discovered by psychologist Mary Chevs Perky in 1910. But normally we have no trouble distinguishing between an internal mental voice, say, and the voice of someone actually speaking to us. Internally generated experiences are evidently tagged in some way, perhaps explicitly indicating their internal source, or simply by being less vivid and distinct than sensations of the outer world. In my own experience, visual imagery seems somewhat conceptual and schematic, lacking the full detail of actual objects. This would seem to indicate that only the higher and not the lower visual centers of the cortex are recruited for mental imagery. Brain scans actually show this for most people. They also show lower activation levels of perceptual brain areas for imagination or remembering compared to higher activity levels for actual sensory input. This is well illustrated by the painting Memory of a Journey by Rene Magritte. The room and table and objects on it are all present, but grayed out and abstracted, lacking the detail and vividness of actual perception. Maybe you'll agree that memory and imagination are somewhat like that compared to actual sensations. When a typical person imagines a face, there is increased activity in the fusiform face area of the temporal lobes. But activity here is typically only half as strong when imagining compared to actually perceiving a face. Imagination activates the sensory systems, but not as much as actually perceiving, helping us tell the difference. Understanding consciousness this way, we can conceive of experiments that could actually answer the question as to whether various animals are conscious in this sense by giving them problems that require imagination to solve and then measuring whether their perceptual systems are somewhat activated during the solving. That is, we could measure whether a monkey or a cat or even a bug pictures things to itself. I'm not aware of any such experiments that have been done, but if you are, please let me know in the comments. Or just add a comment with your guess. Do other animals picture things to themselves like we do? All animals or just some? Let me know. Keep in mind, though, that knowing this doesn't in itself tell us whether an animal can feel pain or sadness or joy. That's a harder question. As I've said before, my guess, at least for many animals, is yes, but I don't think we yet can know for sure.